This video is dedicated to the most popular and most controversial chord in music history. In 1865, Tristan and Isolde premiered in Munich. It wasn't well received because of its complex and innovative nature. Nowadays, the Tristan is considered one of the greatest operas of all time. No music student goes through university without at least once talking about this ominous chord. But what makes it so special? That's an easy question. First of all, the structure is unique. There are no common chords that are made of augmented fourth, major third and fourth. Because of that, you don't really know in which key you're in. At least that's what people say. The Tristan chord could resolve itself in multiple different chords because of its tonal ambiguity. The resolution of the Tristan is an E dominant 7th chord. Well, that makes no sense. You cannot resolve a dissonant chord into another dissonant chord. You start to see the problem of the puzzle. In James Bond Skyfall, there was a computer code that always changed itself when they wanted to break it at a particular point. The Tristan seems to be the same. From basically every side you look at it, there are problems and it seems to change what it means. The typical way to go about figuring out chords is to stack thirds on top of each other. The lowest note then is the fundamental note. That doesn't work here as well. At some point the question comes up to ask yourself if there's actually a right answer, if this unsolvable puzzle can be figured out. There is no way to ask Wagner what he intended this chord to be, but the closest to this is to look at Wagner and the way he composed. Contrary to most people's belief, Wagner didn't use functional harmony to compose, so to argue it is the secondary dominant of the dominant is quite ridiculous. If this would be true, the F would be the diminished fifth, the B the tonic, the D sharp the third, and the G sharp the augmented sixth. It would then resolve into E dominant 7th, the dominant 7th of A minor. A bit too complicated for it to make sense. But A minor is a good start. If we look at the following bars, we won't ever arrive on A minor. Nonetheless, it is always implied. Every time we get close, maybe through an E dominant 7th chord that would naturally resolve into A minor, Wagner purposely falsifies the resolution. He knew what he was doing. Still, A minor is the closest thing we can find to a tonic in the beginning of the overture. Knowing that the piece is in A minor, we can now confidently say that the resolution is the dominant. Let's go back to what we said earlier. If we want to figure out what Wagner thought himself, we have to figure out how he composed. And surprisingly, there are a lot of compositions where he used thorough bass, a very traditional way of composing that most people think died after the Baroque period. And those people couldn't be more wrong. Also, Wagner's mentors and composing teachers were using techniques like the rule of the octave and other traditional ones. It's there that I have to mention that I didn't come up with this. My best friend told me. He studied music theory, and there seems to be a revolution going on in the music theory scene where people are going back to the roots of composing the traditional way, not the way it was taught in the 20th century by Schoenberg and those people. So if you look at the Tristan from a point of view that has traditional composing principles in place, like thorough bass, patterns and the rule of the octave, the Tristan becomes understandable to everyone. Let's look at this rule of the octave. It is a basic pattern of how you can harmonize a scale. There are different versions of it, some are more complex than others. If we look very closely at this, we can see that it's basically the Tristan chord. The only difference, there's a suspension in the melody, the G sharp. That's it. The Tristan chord so can be considered a very traditional step from the scale degree 6 to the scale degree 5 with an added 7th on the E major chord, ending on the half cadence. There's this famous book that is referenced very often in music universities called Romantic Harmony and its Crisis in Wagner's Tristan. The author makes the point that Wagner left the conforms of traditional tonality, and that's definitely true to some degree. Wagner pushed the boundaries of tonality far beyond what people knew at that time, no question. But after writing a whole bachelor's thesis about this topic, I don't agree with the statement that Wagner leaves tonality and that there is a crisis. There's an amazing definition of tonality from Ludwig Holtmeier, a German music theory professor. Tonality, from this perspective, is not a system deduced from one or a few principles or a master formula. Tonality is, similar to the organization of language, the entirety of all conventions and compositional models available at a specific time and place. These conventions and models form a more or less heterogeneous coexistence, a networked patchwork of various historical and stylistic layers. In tonal pieces, these compositional models are interconnected to create larger synthetic units of different levels, which in turn can be understood as model-like. This last sentence is very important because it indicates that there has to be larger syntax, a larger context the different notes must have. And that also explains why something like Schoenberg is not tonal, there is no larger and overall syntax that the notes form. For example, notes do not form together as chords that have a specific meaning and relation to each other. Key is determined not primarily by reference to the central sound of the tonic, but rather by the diatonic scale itself. Tonality, one could exaggerate, signifies the scale. In easy terms, tonality is not a system in which all notes point with the tonic, but rather the whole scale. The active scale determines tonality. With active scale, I mean the scale that is being used at specific points depending on where you look. It will change quite often throughout a piece. So don't think that if a piece is in A minor, they just use the A minor scale. And all of this is true for Wagner, so you can say that his music is still tonal. If you want to learn more about this, I encourage you to learn about the rule of the octave and thorough bass, and you will know more about composing than most music students. Click this video right here next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see each other in the next one.